Hey guys, Michael Neal, Spro and Big Bite Baits Pro. The thing about the forward-facing sonar is it really opened up a window to where you can see those fish that are out suspended that we all knew were there, but we really weren't sure how to catch them. Now I'm gonna go in depth on some of the techniques and the baits used to catch those fish with your forward-facing sonar and help you catch some more. Forward-facing sonar on its own is great, but when you pair it with another unit like a 360, that's when you really unlock a lot of secrets. The forward-facing sonar just points the direction that your trolling motor is, but this you can see all the way around the boat, and you might miss something on the forward-facing, and you can go back and see it. Once you've located on the 360, then you can point your Panoptics or live active target or whatever you got at that target and see if there's any specific fish sitting on that one piece of structure, piece of cover out there. So I found a lot of different things with the 360 that I missed with the forward facing. So you put these two together and it's a golden ticket. So to locate the fish, I'm just looking, I look at this just for the dots of the fish, and I look at this, you can see there's some logs out here, like a stump over here, another stump right there. So I'm looking for the targets, and there's actually a fish on the active target, or the live scope, a couple of them up there. But that's what I'm looking for, is just anything different to point my trolling motor at to see if there's any fish around. And right here we've got just a current chute coming out, and it's got a good break on it. And these fish are going to suspend out off of this break and just let the current come over the top of them. So we're going to ease up here and see if we can't catch one of them. There he is. You see him on there too. Right off the back of that drop. Not a big one. One on the next stick. Forward facing sonar and a jerk bait goes hand in hand like nothing else. Time of year is kind of irrelevant when throwing a jerk bait on these suspended fish. It's just a perfect shad imitator and they can't handle it. Jerk bait's what I almost always pick up first when I'm fishing for these fish that are suspended with the forward-facing sonar. You're going to get a lot of bites on it, but you're also going to get big bites as well. So it's something you can cover a lot of water, you can see easily on your forward-facing sonar, and you can tell how the fish will react to it. It's just a matter of if they want it fast, if they want it slow, if you have to work it fast and kill it in front of their face. There's just so many different options that you can do with a jerkbait to really figure out how the fish want to bite for that day. And it may change throughout the day, it may change from day to day. There's really just no telling. You just got to figure it out as you go and be open-minded with it. Switched up to a swim bait now, and before you just had to manually fish the drop and just go off a feel. But with the forward-facing sonar, you can actually see how far out there the drop is, how steep it is, and how close to the boat your bait is, where the fish are. See, there's one, just bumped it. There's a bunch of them here. You can see a few fish sitting right there, coming out off the drop. And there's just, it's a really steep drop. You can see how fast it comes up, and the depth is not always going to give you an exact reading on these forward-facing sonars for some reason. It's a lot shallower than what it's really showing. So you can see the school of fish sitting right there, 25, 30 feet out. Just got to get my bait down there to them. This hybrid swimmer is really a unique bait choice, and it's just really thin, so it's really subtle. And these fish that you're fishing for, a lot of times are suspended with your forward-facing sonar, and they don't really want to bite. So you either have to make them react or just give them something really finessey, really subtle that they will bite. And this jig head, the pendulate jig head from Big Bite that they came out with this swivel, it's going to eliminate all your line twists. It's going to give it a very, very realistic fall. So if you have fish, chase it to the boat and you need to drop it, you can do that. Or if you just want to throw it out there and just fish it like a traditional swim bait, you've got that option as well. And my preferred method is just to throw it and count it down to whatever depth, look at it on your forward-facing sonar, get it however deep you want it, and just a slow, steady retrieve. Sometimes they'll want it popped. I mean, it's just like when you go out and fish without it, you have to figure out that day to retrieve the fish want. And it's gonna be a little bit different each and every day, and just depending on their mood. So you just gotta use your forward-facing sonar, find the fish, and then figure out the cadence or the retrieve that they want for that day. With a jerkbait fishing this shallow drop, you're gonna dig the bottom, and then you may come over the top of their heads and the fish may not be able to see your bait. But with this swim bait, you can actually work it down the drop, let it fall, see where your bait is, make sure you're keeping that bait in the strike zone. And that's the biggest thing with the forward-facing sonar, is you're fishing for these suspended fish most of the time, and they're just not easy to catch. It's without getting your bait in the right spot with the right depth, then you don't know what you are just fishing blind without it. It's so different than what it used to be. It opened up so many windows, and line size is also a really big deal. With your line size with a jerkbait, you can control how deep it's going, if it's going to sink with your different size gamakatsu hooks, if the fish want it to slowly rise, if they want it to sink, if they want it to sit dead still and just suspend. There's so many different things, and your cadence is also a really big deal. And for the time of year, what I've found, everybody fishes a jerkbait pretty slowly in the wintertime, but a lot of these fish in the summertime actually like that jerkbait to just sit there and suspend in front of their face, almost like it's taunting them. So a lot of times I think we fish too fast for the water temperature just because that's what we've thought, but this forward-facing sonar will teach you a lot of things differently. So a lot of fish will actually follow your bait, and without the forward-facing sonar you wouldn't be able to see them. And there's really two different methods to get them to react. And with a swim bait, if I see them following and I don't think they're going to eat it, I'll just take my rod, snap it a few times, or turn my reel handle a couple times real fast, just to make that bait do a little something different. If you stop it, it's oftentimes going to fall too far from them and they're not going to be interested anymore. So I like a little bit of extra action with a swim bait, but with a jerk bait, I actually like to stop it. And that's the whole deal with throwing fluorocarbon on that jerk bait, is to keep it from floating up. If you throw mono or nylon, it's going to float, but you want it to just sit right there in front of that fish's face. And sometimes with the pause, I mean, it may be 8 or 10 seconds, and then you'll see the fish come up and actually bite it. And that's a lot of times what you think of with a wintertime bite, but they will do that in the summertime also. This year at Eufaula, I caught several fish doing that in May when they were out offshore. So it's actually taught me a lot just in the last 2 years. That's all that I've ran the forward-facing sonar, and it's just an ever-changing process. You never know what kind of mood they're going to be in. You never know how you're going to have to fish your bait. And used to, I mean, we missed so many fish in the same areas that we've always fished, just not knowing how the fish were acting that day. All your sonar on your boat is really, they're all going to be useful for each other. So with the live scope and the forward-facing technology and the 360, they're great when you're in an area fishing, but you don't want to try and find new water that way. So like right here, I've been idling, you can see a big log or a tree and another tree sticking up here. So I can go over here and drop a waypoint and then go back with my forward-facing sonar and see what kind of fish are on it, how they're positioned, how high in the water column they are, and see how they'll react to the bait. So we're gonna see if we can catch one right here. So you see right here where I marked my waypoint, you see the tree on the 360, you can see it on the live scope also. So you see all the fish around it. I don't think I made a very good cast to it that time, but that's where they really come in handy, is you know where one is, your waypoint shows up here, you can see it on that one, and then you can really make pinpoint casts to exactly where you're wanting to throw. Forward-facing sonar really just, it'll educate you on what kind of mood the fish are in, just in general. Sometimes you'll throw a bait out there and you may see them actually swim off from it, or you may see them come up to it and just look at it and go away. And in the past, you didn't know that was happening. You thought you were throwing the right bait and the fish just changed, they weren't in that area anymore, or that you were just in the wrong spot. But now you can know if the fish are there to know what kind of adjustments you need to make, whether it's a color change, a weight change, just a totally bait change or whatever it is, you can see what kind of mood the fish are in to know what kind of adjustments to make to be able to get them to bite. When I'm fishing a place and I'm not seeing a fish on my live scope, then I'll still cast around, but I won't necessarily cast to where I think a fish is going to be sitting, like where the school was or anything like that. I would rather just cast around and try and pick up a bonus fish as to make a bad cast at the school and risk pulling them or messing them up. So I still fish. I can't fish in a tournament situation and not be casting it somewhere at something. So if your bait's not in the water, you can't catch one, but you can also mess up by making too many casts in the spot where the fish are going to come back and set up at. So it's important to fish around and just constantly look with your forward facing sonar and just try and pick off one of those extra fish here and there. And those will oftentimes make a big difference in the tournament day. Right there, you can actually see the topwater bait moving across the, right there it is at 30, 25, 20. I stopped it, started it again. You can see everything from the top to 80 feet of water if you want to with these things. It's just a matter of finding the depth the fish are in and finding a cadence or a retrieve to get them to bite. So another way that the forward-facing sonar 360 and the live scope, you can see the grass lines. So visually right here, you can see what's going on above the water. You've got a point here, a little cut, and another point. But if this was 10 feet deep, without some sort of sonar down there, if you didn't have good mapping or whatever, you didn't know that that ditch was there. But you can see it right here on the 360, where this hard line comes from behind the boat, makes the turn right here. There's some scattered grass out in front of it. You can see it on the live scope too, some little shorter grass, and then where that other point comes out across. So that's another thing. You're not necessarily going to see the fish in these grass clumps, but you can use this to find the areas that the fish are going to live and be able to make the right cast, the repeated cast to hit that point or that ditch or that one isolated clump of grass that you might not even known existed. Another thing in the grass is just, you may have a big grass flat that you're fishing and see just a bare spot. And those bare spots or holes in the grass are oftentimes where fish are going to group up. So you can see the holes, points, ditches, turns, isolated clumps, all of the above. You can see that all on the forward-facing sonar. Three main baits that I use for forward-facing sonar fishing are a jerk bait, a swim bait, and a drop shot. And it's just going to vary on where I'm at in the country or what depth I'm fishing. But the primary one that I'll throw 90% of the time probably is a jerk bait. And this is something that you can control the depth on, you can control the cadence, you can watch the fish come after it and you know if you're working it too fast or too slow. And this one is a Spro mixed stick, and this is color Spro blue. I like something that's pretty transparent, that the fish really can't get too good a look at when you're doing this, because oftentimes you're fishing this thing pretty slow and just trying to figure out how to make the fish react to it. So this bait, just like everything else from Spro, has got super sharp gamakatsu hooks on it. It casts really well, so you can make good long casts to get to those fish without spooking them. And a jerk bait's something that with forward-facing sonar, you can just really see how they react and see how the fish want to bite it for that day. The second one that I really rely on a lot is a swim bait. And this one is the Big Bite Hybrid Swimmer. And it's really unique because it's got kind of two characteristics. It's got a fluke style tail, and it's also got a paddle tail. So this bait is going to be very subtle in the water. It's got a very realistic action. If you think about it, a lot of the swim baits are kind of overpowering compared to what a shad really looks like in the water. A shad's just real natural, real soft, real subtle, and that's what this bait's made to mimic. And this is actually a head that Big Bite designed specifically for forward-facing sonar fishing, and it's called the pendula head. It's got a super special, super sharp gamakatsu hook in it, and it's got a swivel right here, so you would never have line twist. This is something that if a fish chases your jerkbait to the boat, you can drop straight down, or you can cast it, and this thing's always going to maintain a good straight retrieve with that swivel in the head. And then the third one is just a drop shot. I mean, especially up north in smallmouth country, this is where it's at. I mean, you've got so many ways to catch them, but a drop shot and smallmouth just go hand in hand. And this is the Big Bite Smallie Smasher. Green pumpkin is about all I throw, some short of green pumpkin. This one's green pumpkin purple. And the Smallie Smasher's got some ribs, it's got a good tail and a flat body to it, the flat belly. And it's just a really subtle gliding action when it's falling, but yet it's got so much action when you actually shake the rod tip. I throw it with either a 3/16 to a 3/8 Denali Kovert tungsten weight, just depending on how deep I am. And I use a 1/0 Gamakatsu light wire worm hook with a 10 keeper. And I like to straight shank it, the straight shank hook over a nose hook. It just seems like you get a lot better hookup ratio, a lot better land ratio. So these 3 baits are really what I lean on when I'm forward facing sonar fishing. When I'm fishing a jerkbait, I like somewhere in a 6'10" to no longer than a 7-foot rod. And when you're forward facing sonar fishing, oftentimes you're throwing straight out the front of the boat. So if you've got too long a rod, you're gonna wind up hitting your trolling motor, your graphs, or whatever's in front of you. So something in that length is what I like to stay in. I actually throw a little bit softer one when I'm looking at them on the forward facing sonar instead of just going down a bank or a bluff throwing a jerkbait, because you know they're coming. And anything you can do to not feel the bite quite as quickly oftentimes can be a good thing, because you're looking at it right there on the screen. I like SUNLINE, 16 pound to 10 pound, just depending on what depth I'm wanting my jerkbait to get into. And if I'm wanting to get it really deep, I throw 10. If I want to keep it up, I'll throw up to 16. And I like fluorocarbon over monofilament, because a lot of times you're letting that jerkbait sit still in front of that fish's face for 3, 4, 5 seconds at a time. So if you don't want the bait to float, you can't use monofilament or nylon. If you do, it's going to float up and get away from that fish, and they're oftentimes going to figure out something's not quite right. So with a jerkbait, one way to control the depth besides the line size is with your hooks. And if you want it to get deeper, you put bigger oversized hooks on it, make it heavier, and it's going to sink a little bit with each pull, but it's not going to necessarily sink to the bottom. But what I often find is I want it to just perfectly suspend, and it may change with water temperature. Each bait will suspend a little bit different in colder water versus warmer water. So these Gamakatsu Aaron Martens treble hooks, they're great to put on this McStick. And one other little bitty key that I'll do, sometimes especially when they're chasing small bait, is I will put a feathered treble hook on the back. And this is not something that I do a lot, but if they're being really finicky, I think they will key on that just like they will on the top water. You'll catch a lot just on the back hook, but you'll get some extra bites doing that. I like a high-speed reel on it. Somewhere in the 7-to-1 range is where I typically like to stay. I don't want to go too fast. A lot of times you're doing this in the winter time where you don't want to work the bait too fast. But you don't want too slow, where if you want to reel in and you see another fish, you want to be able to get your bait in and throw back out there at it pretty quickly. For a swim bait, I like a spinning rod, and the main thing with this is you can throw it a long ways, and if you see one straight under the boat, you can just drop it down and jig vertically for it as well. I like a Denali Lithium 7.4 for this. It's a medium heavy. I like a lot of backbone when I'm making good long casts with a spinning rod. Somewhere in that 7-foot to 7.6 range, anywhere in that, you can just make good long casts, and you got plenty of backbone to get those fish. So I like braid to a fluorocarbon leader, 10-pound SUNLINE XX1 to an 8 to 10-pound SUNLINE Sniper leader. Nothing real fancy there. It's just a good way to get a lot of bites and some really good ones as well. With a drop shot, again, this is just pretty much a standard preference of mine, a 7-foot medium action Denali N3 rod. This is my go-to spinning rod for any kind of finesse, slow fishing. If wacky worms, drop shots, shaky heads, anything like that. And same thing, a good 2500 to 3000 series reel, 10-pound SUNLINE SX1 to an 8 to 10-pound SUNLINE Sniper leader. Nothing real complicated there. You just gotta have the confidence to get those fish in on that light line. Take these tips and go out with your forward-facing sonar units. Hopefully it'll help you catch more fish. All of these items are available at tacklewarehouse.com. Again, a jerkbait, a swim bait, and a drop shot. Go out, use your forward-facing sonar, and get some bites.